Good morning. I'm Mr. Lambert.
And I'm Mrs. Blaylock.
Welcome to the E2 News.
This is the news for the week of Tuesday, May 26th to Friday, May 29th.
Here is this week's lunch menu.
Tuesday, soft taco, choice ravioli.
Wednesday, chicken and noodles, choice baked pork chops.
Thursday, hot dog, choice mini sub.
Friday, lasagna, choice chicken nuggets.
The Explorer bookstore will be open this Wednesday during lunch.
This just in, remember, each book costs just $1.50 each.
Wednesday is School Spirit Day. Wear an E2 shirt or our school colors to show your school spirit. This is not a jeans day and there will be no charge.
The 4th and 5th grade program is this Thursday at 6 p.m. Students need to arrive between 5:40 and 5:45 and report to their classrooms.
And now it's time for the
Shout Out of the Week.
Dr. Scott would like to give a shout out to several classes who have spelled out perfect attendance and earned a class popcorn party. These classes are
Miss Plummer, Mrs. Hines, Mrs. Lavelle, Mrs. Short, Mrs. Payton, and Mrs. Miller.
Thank you, students, for doing your part by coming to school on time every day.
And now it's time for Mrs. Womack to do the fish cash drawing for books.
Good morning, Eastside Explorers, and once again, it's time for a fish cash drawing for books. Remember, if your name gets called, come on down to the office and get a certificate that you can use for a free book on Wednesday at the bookstore. First grade, our first winner from Mr. Barnett's class, Wade Smith. From Mrs. Payton's class, Brian Jimenez. From Mrs. Shuck's class, Cynthia Schottmer. And our last winner from first grade is from Mrs. Shuck's class again, and it's Sammy Hauk. Come on down and get her certificate. From second grade, Ms. Poor's class, Cherish Hughes. Miss Bennett's class, Deaya Simmons. Mrs. Poor's class again, Logan Simmons. And our last second grader for this week is from Mrs. Poor's class, and it's Jamal Gibbs. Come on down, Jamal. Our first third grader from Mrs. Short's class, Jonathan Jackson. Mrs. Stanley's class, Jahan Freeman. You got it from Mrs. Sanders, but Stanley's class. Jahan. From Mrs. Sanders' class, Terry Simonson. And our last third grader for this week is from Mrs. Sanders' class again, and it is Michael Lawless. Come on down and get a certificate. From fourth grade, Mrs. Reisinger's class, Matt Hubble. Mrs. Biggus's class, Dominic Thurman. Mrs. Biggus's class again, Corey Holden. And our last fourth grader for this week is from Mrs. Reisinger's class, and it's Caleb Lennon. From fifth grade, Mrs. Lavelle's class, Caroline Ernie. Mr. Lambert's class, Kennedy Hinton. Mrs. Fulton's class, Kelsey Villano. And our last fifth grader from this week, Mrs. Fulton's class again, and it is Serenity Patterson. Come on down and get a certificate. Once again, Eastside Explorers, thank you for being proud, positive, and productive.
Have a great week!